The problem is that if you do something at which you are very good and which is generally very, very successful, you will have no skills whatsoever for coping with the disaster. When a disaster happens, you will feel remorse, you will feel guilt, you will feel anger, you're going to be worried that someone's going to complain, you're going to wonder, what did I do wrong this time that I didn't do wrong last time? Why has this happened to me? It must be someone's fault. Now, this, of course, is just a light-hearted publication from, I think from the British Medical Journal, about 10 years ago, in which they were illustrating the basis of clinical practice, and of course they were poking fun, I'm going to say, at physicians and surgeons older than I am. And they said that, well, the basis for clinical decision-making amongst some members of the medical profession was eminence. And the marker of that was the radiance of white hair. You could use a humanometer to measure it, and so on. If the surgeons in the audience will forgive me, but the British Medical Journal said this, they said that confidence was often the basis for making medical and surgical decisions. The marker was bravado. The measuring device was a sweat test or no sweat at all. But they said that only applied to surgeons. I couldn't comment. Anyway, my point is that individual physicians and surgeons may well have a practice which is very, very successful, but when things go wrong, whether I'm a physician or a surgeon, I will not have a skill base for dealing with that disaster. Now, uncertainty is nothing new for physicians or for surgeons, and historically we can, this is some quotes here from Plato, who felt that, I think he felt that physicians ought to disguise uncertainty, and he said, physicians employ lies for good and noble purposes. Hippocrates thought that the doctor-patient relationship would be compromised by full disclosure of uncertainty or poor prognosis. And a Frenchman in 1672 said of medicine, a very imperfect science, full of guesswork. We scarcely understand its subject. The more enlightened only feel their way groping amidst the thick gloom. Now, the thing about uncertainty was that there was a surgeon practicing in Boston called Ernest Amory Codman. And he was really the first person, physician or surgeon, to say, well, if we're uncertain about what the outcomes are, had we not better describe them? And he came up with what he called the end result concept. Nowadays, we might say, well, that was an audit or an outcome study or research. But he called it the end result concept. Now, he insisted, he was an orthopaedic surgeon, and he insisted that all his patients were followed up, and it was determined what happened to them. Did they do well? Did the limb get better, get worse? How many of them became infected, and so on? Now, this was private practice in the 19th century. Well, I think it was actually about 1910, 1920, private practice in Boston. Very wealthy patients. And you might think that that approach would have won him friends. In fact, he lost his job as a result of that approach. Not only did he lose his job because he fell out with the university and he fell out with his colleagues, but his patients were outraged. It was as if he were a god and had said, I'm fallible, I make mistakes. They were simply outraged. And the newspapers of the day said that for a doctor or a surgeon to be truly successful, trust had to be blind. There could be no question of measuring the outcomes. And in fact, he lost his job and went from Boston, I think, down to New York, where he then went on to re-establish his career and develop further the end result concept, and also published a series of trials and so on, comparing outcomes of different treatments. But what he did not do, which is now currently pretty much standard, is that although he published results and compared things and followed up patients, there was no public transparency about that. So certainly there was a personal and private transparency, and there was transparency within the university community, and with other surgeons and physicians, but he didn't publish his data to the wider world. That has taken another 100 years or so to become acceptable. Now, I've already given you some clues as to why rare events, such as infections in artificial joints like this, present such a challenge to the operator, okay, and to the system, meaning the hospital. And the answer, of course, is there's no learning curve for the surgeon or the physician or the hospital. Remember, for every artificial device implanted, the infection rate now, generally speaking, is less than 1%. So less than 1 in 100 will become infected. Modern surgery is an enormously successful discipline. So these patients are rare when the infection does occur. When it does occur, most such patients will be treated at the hospital where they have the surgery. That means that each individual hospital, okay, so a small district general hospital up in the north of England, is only, if it's got 2 or 3 surgeons doing a few hundred operations a year, they've got 2 or 3 infections per annum. Neither the hospital, nor the individual surgeons, nor any of the physicians or microbiologists will acquire any skills or experience in this field. They will never be able to do a trial to work out what's the best way to manage this. And we would argue that that is one of the reasons which motivates us, and we would say should motivate the rest of the country, to establish specialist bone infection centres. In the same way that you've seen the government increasingly moving towards cancer centres and heart disease centres and so on, is that for rare events, to gain expertise, you need to consolidate expertise in single centres, otherwise you will go round and round in circles. Now, thought a little bit of light relief again, another quiz. Which is the odd one out? So this is an injecting drug user. Picking something topical. Injecting drug user. These are some germs under the microscope. Now, for those who don't often look down the microscope, in this particular case, the germs are these things. These dark blue things. I'm sure that helps everyone. Those are the germs, trust me. This is an American rock band. It really is an American rock band. And they are not especially famous. Okay, so no one need feel bad if you've never heard of them. And the American Postal Service. Right, so does anyone know what this is about? And what has it got to do with bone infection?
How it's spread?
How it's spread. You're onto it.
By needles?
No.
Stab, licking,
stab.
saliva?
Well, so I'm being very naughty, aren't I? So the American, okay, I'll tell you the name of the rock group. In fact, I'll show you their album cover. It really is. And that really is the album cover. They're not popular. Anyway, so Anthrax is a very mediocre American rock group. And you may recall back in sort of 2001 and 2002, there was an outbreak of anthrax bioterrorism spread through the US Postal Service. And anthrax is this germ over here. And anthrax is what is currently killing a very small number of drug users in the United Kingdom who are injecting heroin contaminated with anthrax. And the connection with bone infection is that anthrax in animals can spread into bone, and then the powdered up fragments of bone, that sort of thing is what's contaminating the heroin, probably in the United Kingdom. Anyway, a bit of light relief before we move back on to more serious matters.